Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, everybody. I'd like to say welcome and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. My name is Tom Rogers. I'm the Marketing Manager of Intellitech Solutions, and I will be facilitating the meeting today. A few quick housekeeping items. We have the lines in listen-only mode, but there are a few options for asking questions during our presentation. You can type your question in the question box, or if there's a question you would prefer to ask verbally, you can use the hand raise function on the left side of the toolbar, and we will unmute your line. We will also be unmuting our lines at the end for a general question and answer session. Lastly, if you do have any problems or issues during the presentation, you can send your question in the chat box, and we will do our best to help you out. Today we will be presenting on payroll processing and direct deposit in Microsoft Dynamics GP. Presenting today will be Janice Wojtek, one of our senior consultants. I'm sure several of you are familiar with Janice, but for those of you who have not had the chance to meet her, she's worked with Dynamics GP for more than 18 years now and has worked on a variety of different GP implementations. And again, today she will be showing us payroll processing solutions in Dynamics GP. And with that, I will turn it over to Janice.
Thank you, Tom, and welcome, everyone. As Tom said, we're going to be talking about the basics of payroll processing and direct deposit today. And the reason for doing so is that there has been a recent change in the licensing in Dynamics GP. And what Microsoft has done is with the release of GP 2013, the licensing for the payroll and HR modules are going to be included in the basic licensing. Prior to this, if you wanted HR and payroll, it was a separate charge, and it was licensed based on the number of employees that you had. So if you were to upgrade from, say, GP 2010 to GP 2013, you would now be eligible to receive the payroll and HR functionality for an unlimited number of employees at no extra charge. So we feel that this is something that a lot of our clientele could take advantage of. So I wanted to give you an idea of how the basic payroll in Great Plains works. First of all, some of the features. You can customize all your codes, so your employee code, your pay codes, your benefit code, your deduction codes. You set those up to fit your organization's needs. So they are totally user-defined. You can also assign employee classes to your individual employees and set up pay codes so that individuals are automatically paid if they have a salary type of payroll. When you go in and process your weekly payroll, a person set up for a weekly salary, you won't have to do any other work. It will automatically be paid. And the employee classes will also help you to organize your payroll if you have certain groups of employees that are paid in a separate pay run. You assign them to a class, and then you can restrict that payroll on that class. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can set up pay run IDs, which will hold the information to determine what's included in your pay run. So what pay frequency you're going to be paying with this pay run, what deductions, what benefits, they can all be defined and saved so that you can go in and quickly process your payroll. The system will automatically calculate taxes, deductions, and benefits. And you can also have the system calculate the taxes for individuals who work in multiple states. You can set up your overtime and double time pay codes to be a factor of the regular rate of pay. And what that does is that makes sure that your pay rates are all consistent. So if I have an overtime rate of 1.5 times the employee rate, the system will calculate that for you. And if you have a person who gets an increase, it will automatically increase the overtime and double time pay codes that are based on that rate of pay. We're going to see a lot of user-defined information on the employees. We have a lot of fields where you can track information, and we'll be looking at a lot today. And then when we get into the advanced HR modules in a couple of weeks, you'll see that we have a lot more user-defined information that you determine what you need to track for the employees and then set up those fields to track that information. And we have an interface with Office Word so that you can do things like send out letters to employees, and that could be anything from, a birthday greeting, a notice of a COBRA when people are leaving the business. It's a very easy interface, and we'll be taking a look at that today between Microsoft Dynamics GP and Word. As far as going from an outsourced payroll to an in-house payroll processing, there are going to be some additional chores which are going to be taken up by the payroll person, but these will be offset by significant cost savings, eliminating the payroll processing fees that you pay to your outside processor. So as far as entering the time, which is something that you would normally either do now, or if you're using a time tracking, there will be an interface to the outside payroll system. You can either have that entered in manually, or we can do an interface between a time clock and have that set up for you. You will now be responsible for printing any checks and uploading the direct deposit file to the bank, and also submitting your tax return. So the system will print out either your tax return or the information that will be used for you to fill out the tax return, but it will be your responsibility to submit those tax returns. The federal and state tax rates will be maintained within the system, and as there are changes to either federal or state tax rates, Microsoft Dynamics GP will release a tax update, which you can then go out and retrieve and keep that up to date. Any local taxes are set up in the system by the user, and if changes are made, you would go in and make those changes. And as I said before, there are a few extra housekeeping type items that will be brought in-house if you do bring the payroll in-house, but that will be offset by the savings that you'll see from your payroll provider. The areas that I want to cover today are, we're first going to look at the employee maintenance screen, and then take a look at the pay code setup, and then next we'll look at the deduction and benefits setup. We'll go through entering time and other transactions in the system. We'll go through processing a payroll, and then look at a couple inquiry screens. And then if there are any questions, we'll have time for that at the end of the session. Okay, so I'm going to launch into GP. And we're going to start by looking at the employee maintenance screen. So if you're familiar, if you've worked in GP, if you're familiar with the screens, it should look, the layout should look very familiar to you. When we're looking at this screen, the fields that are highlighted in red would be required fields. Any fields that have the label that's blue and underlined means that it is a drill back to another screen where the information was originally set up. And then if you have the red and the underline, that's a drill back and a required field. Keep in mind that we can modify these screens as we would any other screen in GP. So if you have a field that you're not using and it's just cluttering up the screen, we do have the flexibility to change the screen. We can also change the tab sequence or make some fields required if they aren't currently. But if you want, for your organization, you want to make those required, we can make those changes for you. So this, as I said at the beginning, the employee ID is user-defined. We typically find that the easiest way to set up the employee ID is to have some reference to the employee's name. Makes it easier for lookup. And we do have the capability, once the IDs are set up, to change that. Someone gets married and changes their name. Their old ID now doesn't make sense. We have a tool that we can use to change those IDs for you if you need to. And this is a screen where you would put in all the demographic information for your employees, such as your address, your Social Security number, phone number. And we do have the ability in the system to keep an unlimited number of address IDs for the employee. And at the top we have the class ID. So again, this is going to function as it would in other areas of GP, in the sales side, the vendor side, and the inventory side. It's going to be used to default information on new employees when you set them up, or to group employees for reporting purposes. But there's also an additional function in the payroll process. You can use your class ID to restrict the payroll process to a certain group of employees. So for instance, salespeople normally tend to be a different breed of employee where they might be paid on a different frequency than your individual employees, say on a monthly where they're getting their commissions. So you could set up a class ID for the salespeople, and then when you go to process them, you would just limit that process to that particular class of employees. Down at the bottom we have 5 categories. 2 of them are in red, which means they're required fields, the department and the position, which is really the job title. And these are going to be used to help determine what general ledger accounts are posted to when the payroll is processed. And we'll be looking at that setup a little later. The other fields, the division, location, and supervisor, are optional fields. You can set them up if you need to. If you don't, you can leave them blank. I'm going to click on my additional information button. And in this screen, you'll see a lot of fields where you can track information on your employees. And we have fields such as the nickname, alternate name, and don't be too concerned about the labels. We do have the flexibility to change the labels to signify the information that you want to track on your employees. And any time when you're looking at screens and you see fields that are just boxes with no other icons on them, such as a calendar icon or a drop-down, that means that these are text fields. And you can basically type in, do a free-form text, type in whatever you want in those fields. They're not generally used for processing in the system, so that's why you do have the flexibility to use those fields for whatever is going to suit your organization. So just on this screen, we have the 2 fields here, nickname and alternate name. You also have 2 user-defined fields over on the right that's set up for the last review date and the spouse. And then we have another user-defined field in called the spouse's name. The field labeled minimum net pay would be used if you had, say, a garnishment on an employee, and the order that you received from the court said that the employee must be allowed to take home a minimum amount of pay for that period. So let's say that it says that they must be able to take home at least $200. If you filled in this field minimum net pay of $200, when you are processing your payroll and start taking up deductions, taxes, and the garnishment and other deductions that the employee might have, once it reaches that minimum net pay amount, it will stop taking out the deductions to make sure that you are in compliance with the court order. At the top, we have our Word link, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this and go to Prepare an Employee Letter. We do have a bunch of templates in the system, and you can either modify these templates or you can add to them. I'm just going to go ahead and prepare a birthday letter for this employee. And so this is the template that's in the system. As I said, it is user customizable. You can do the link from the employee card if you wanted to do a letter for an individual employee. You can also use this link with our smart list, where you might be grouping your employees and then do a link into Word for a group of employees. So you can do things like, I want to send out a birthday letter to all the people who have a birthday within the month of June. Okay, I'm going to go to my Go To button, And we're going to take a look at pay codes and the setup of pay codes in the system. So pay codes are user-defined. You can use whatever code you want. Again, I think it's easiest to identify the codes, but people who are coming over from older legacy systems sometimes use a numeric code. Either one is fine. We have the flexibility to use whatever makes sense for you. And once you set up a pay code, what you do is you decide what pay type this pay code is going to be. And so this is our list of pay types. The hourly and the salary are the most commonly used. So if I have an hourly pay code, I'm going to go in each week or each pay period and enter the number of hours that that employee worked, and that will be multiplied by their rate to come up with their gross pay. For the salary type, you go in and you set that up in the system. You give it a pay frequency, either weekly, biweekly, semi-monthly, so on and so forth. And then when you process that payroll and include your salaries, that will automatically go through. So you don't have to worry about doing anything else for your salary people unless they were to take a vacation or holiday or sick day, something like that, and you want to track that in the system. That would be the only time that you would have to make an adjustment for your salary people. Our commission type as well as our other type are going to allow you to give the individual a lump sum payment. So if you give out commissions to your salespeople, if you give out bonuses, a lot of people give out bonuses at Christmas time, or an annual bonus, a signing bonus, or an adjustment to someone's pay. That would be a type of other or commission. And then we have the types such as overtime, double time, and your PTO types, vacation, sick, which are going to be based on another pay code. So if I say that this is going to be an overtime pay rate and it's going to be based on my hourly rate, I determine what my factor is going to be. And here it's set up for 1.5. So when I set up this pay code, it will look at the person's hourly rate and it will multiply it by 1.5 to give them their overtime rate. And then if you make if the person gets an increase and you make an adjustment to the hourly rate, the pay codes that are based on that rate will automatically be updated. So you don't have to worry about maybe missing one or doing a calculation incorrectly. That will all be taken care of. So I'm going to close out of the setup and go back in, and we're looking at PLAR. And PLAR has a salary pay code, and then she has a holiday pay code that is based on her salary. Her salary is currently $26,000, and I'm going to go into her salary pay code and give her an increase. So I'm going to increase her to $27,000. And what's going to happen when I save this is, first of all, I'm going to be asked if I want to roll this down to all the pay codes that are related to this. So in this case, she has a holiday, she might have a vacation or a sick, and that will update the other pay codes. And then the other thing that's happening is I'm being prompted to give a reason for a change. And you can set up your system to track these or to allow the people to bypass this. But this is going to be used to track our history in the HR module, so we can go back and see when a person got a change in a pay rate. Okay, so now that I changed my salary, I can see that my holiday pay also changed to $27,000 automatically when I changed the salary rate. I have two inquiry buttons down at the bottom, and we're going to take a look at those. First of all, the history button will show you each transaction that the employee had for this pay code, and that's going to go back in time. You can see it for each year that the employee worked. And then the summary button will show you the month totals as well as the quarter totals, and then also the year-to-date. And again, this will be for all the years that the employee had history on this particular pay code. Okay, we're now going to take a look at the deduction setup. Again, we're looking at Pilar, and she has a deduction setup, 401k. Again, these codes are going to be user-defined by you. You can put a start and an end date on each of the deductions, and you can set that date to be in the future. So, if you have a rule in your company that the 401k deduction isn't going to start until the employees worked in your organization for 60 days, you can set that up on the start date, and then once it hits the start date, it will start deducting. You can also use the field transaction required for your deductions, and that would be used for deductions that are going to vary in amount. For instance, some employers will allow their employees to send items Federal Express on the corporate account, and then they'll deduct it from their pay to get reimburse the company for that expense. In that case, you would want it to be transaction required, so that each time you need to make this deduction, you would go and put in the amount of the deduction. Generally, you're going to set up the method to be one of the ones that we see here. Most common would be your percentage of gross wages or a fixed amount. Some people also do use an amount per unit, so a lot of times we see this with unions where they're going to take a percentage or an amount out of each hour that the person works. So this one is currently set up as a percentage of gross wages, and it's set for 3%. You can use either a single percentage or you can use a multiple. And if you choose multiple, what's going to happen is you'll see a tiers button becomes activated, and this would allow you to put in different tiers. So for instance, let's say from the gross wages from $0 to $5,000, I'm going to deduct 3% from the employee. But then from $5,001 to $10,000, it's going to drop down to 2.75, and so on and so forth. So you can set up your tiers to accommodate the way that you want your deductions to come out. Then you can set up a maximum deduction, either by pay period or by calendar year. Since this is a 401k deduction, the calendar year makes the most sense. You can also set up a deduction for lifetime. And generally, that would be used if you had something like an employee loan that they were paying back, and it was going to cross over fiscal years. We're basing this deduction on gross wages, so we have the capability to determine what pay codes we want this to be based on. So for instance, if we wanted the 401k to be taken out of the employee's wages but not out of any bonuses that they receive, I would base it on selected pay codes and then just insert the pay codes that I wanted it to come out from. You can also sequence your deductions, and what that will do is it will determine the order in which the deductions are taken. If you have an employee who has a large amount of deductions that might be getting down to either the minimum pay amount that we talked about earlier or to come down to a zero check, it will determine the order in which the deductions are taken. And then we have a summary inquiry screen, and this is going to be very similar to the one we looked at before. Obviously, we don't have hours attached to this, but this gives you a breakdown by month and then by quarter and the amount per year and the amount life to date that has come out of this employee's pay for this deduction. Okay, for employee benefits, this screen looks very similar to the deduction screen, but employee benefits would be used for items such as an employer match on the 401k, which is what this one is. It would also be used to track the employer's portion of the medical expenses. As you know, there was a change in the healthcare law, and that requires employers, it's now limited to a certain number of employees, but employers have to report on the W-2 the amount of medical insurance that they are covering for their employees. So what we would do is set up a benefit for each employee and point that to the correct box on the W-2, and you'd be able to track that for your employees. So the benefit code that we're looking at right here is as I said, it's a match of a 401k plan. And because of that, we based this on a percentage of the deduction. And the deduction that it's based on is the 401k deduction, which is the one that we looked at that was set up for PLAR. So this is saying that the employer is going to contribute 5% of the deduction that the employee deducts, and it's going to be up to a maximum of 10%. And then we also have a maximum benefit. We can do it by pay period, calendar year, or lifetime. This one is set up as a maximum for the calendar year. And again, you have the summary screen, which tracks how much of this benefit the employee has received throughout time. Okay, so those are the basic setups for the employee. I didn't take you through setting up the taxes because that's pretty mundane. You go in and you put in the federal exemptions and married, single status. You assign the employee to the state that they work in and assign them to any local taxes that they are subject to. What I wanted to show you was what's called our quick employee assignment screen, and this is a great screen to be able to get a snapshot of the employee, and we can see pay codes, benefits, and deductions right here, and you can also make changes in this screen. So it's a quick way to make changes to employee codes. And right now we're looking at all the codes that are available in our company. The ones that are marked are applicable to that employee. If I just wanted to see what that particular employee has, I can mark only employee codes, and then I can see what codes this employee has been assigned in the system. Okay, so before we go in and process the payroll, I want to talk a little bit about the payroll posting setup, and this is going to be what determines what general ledger accounts are going to be used when you process your payroll. So we have all the different categories that we can set up, and the department and the position, when we looked at the employee maintenance card, these were two required fields, and then we have the pay code. So what this screen is saying is for a particular department, so I'm going to go in and just choose the accounting department, for a particular position within that department, or I can use the all, which would be every position within that department, and then what pay code. So I'm going to leave the pay code at all too, and then I go in and I decide which general ledger account I'm going to have that flow through. And this gives you a lot of flexibility in setting up the proper general ledger accounting. And you can use this in conjunction with our allocation accounts. So for instance, if you have an employee who works 50%, you want their pay to be split 50% in one department, 50% in another on the general ledger side, we can point their pay code to an account that's set up to allocate between two other accounts. Also for the pay code, some people want bonuses to hit a separate general ledger account. So in that case, you could say, my sales department, all positions, but for my pay code bonuses, will go into a bonus expense account. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to actually go through and process the payroll. So depending on if you are just manually entering your payroll or if it's coming in from another source, such as a time clock, it's going to all end up in this screen. So if it's imported from a time clock, the transactions will come into the screen where you can review them and edit them if you need to. If you are manually entering the time, this is the screen that you would enter the time on. And for the batch IDs, you can set up a recurring batch or a single batch. If you had a recurring batch, you could put in transactions that can be used over and over again and save some time with entering transactions. You can enter in either pay codes, or you can also enter in deductions and benefits in this screen. So for the recurring batches, a lot of times if you have a deduction or a benefit, such as an auto allowance that you're going to give people on a monthly basis, you can enter them in a recurring batch, and then when you go into build your payroll, you just select that batch. The date will increment based on the frequency of that batch. And also here, you see the pay rates. If you had someone who was entering time for you and they did not have the security to look at pay rates, you can set up this screen so that the pay rates can be hidden, so that you can have someone entering it who would not be able to view the pay rates. Okay, once your transactions are in a batch, we're going to go into build checks. And build checks is where we have the default ID, and you can have as many default IDs as you need. And what the default ID will do is it's going to keep your settings for a particular pay run. So for instance, a lot of people will say, you know, I have union employees. Union dues is taking out on the first pay of the month, or same thing with medical deductions. You might take out the medical insurance deduction the first week of the month, or if you have a biweekly payroll, the 2 payrolls, the 2 months where you have 3 payrolls instead of 2, a lot of people do not take deductions out on those two particular pays. So what you can do with your ID is you decide, for this particular pay code ID, I'm going to include or not include specific deductions as well as benefits. You can also determine on this ID what frequencies you're going to pay. So if you have some people who are paid weekly, some people who are paid semi-monthly, you could set up a default ID that just included the weekly employees. You can also limit your pay run to a particular class of people. So again, if I just want to pay a particular class in this pay run, I put that restriction in, and then I can save it on this default ID so it'll be there the next time I want to process the same payroll. Right now I'm just going to make that all. And I'm going to go in and select the batch that we were working on. And I'm going to build my pay run. Once the paychecks are built, we're going to go in and calculate checks. And calculate checks, it is telling me that there are warnings that exist. Normally that would be someone was over their limit in vacation, and so I had the system set up to allow them to do that, but to give me a warning. If you have errors, which we don't have any, the system will prevent you from going any further, and you have to take care of the errors. And errors generally are in our payroll posting setup, where we set up our general ledger accounts. If we had a new department that we set up and we forgot to add it into the payroll posting matrix, that would be an error that we'd have to go back and fix before we process the payroll. So our calculate check report will basically tell us exactly what the net amount of the check, show us the gross pay, all the benefits and deductions and taxes. And so what you would want to do is to run through this payroll report before you go in to print the checks out. and verify that everything is correct. If there is anything that you need to change, you just go back into your build, make the changes, and rerun your build, and then recalculate your checks. I'm going to go ahead and print my checks. And right now we have the direct deposit, which is active. If we wanted to inactivate the direct deposit for this particular pay run, a lot of people will say, when I give my employees bonuses, I want to be able to just hand them a check rather than doing the direct deposit. So I can inactivate the direct deposit for a particular pay run. If I am doing direct deposit, I have the option of printing out a voided check for the employee, or I can print the checks for those that are getting paper checks and then print a direct deposit statement for the other employees. And that saves some cost on the actual printing of the checks because you print the statements on white paper. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just print these to the screen. And once I have them printed, I can go in and reprint any checks if I need to. I can void the checks if I needed to. So, for instance, if you were printing the checks, you forgot to put the check stock in the printer, they printed out to white paper, you do have the capability here to go back and reprint those checks. I'm just going to go ahead and post my checks, which will put the transactions in the general ledger. And we do have a lot of reports that you can print out at this time. I have them turned off right now. Throughout the system, 99% of the reports we are able to reprint them. So if your office is a paperless environment, you can turn off your reports, or you can decide which ones you want to print out a hard copy of. Okay, so our checks have been printed, our payroll has been processed, and our last step would be, if we are using direct deposit, we would go in to generate our direct deposit file. When we set up direct deposit, your employees can decide how they want their pay allocated, and generally that comes down to your organization. You know, do you want them to only be able to contribute to one account, or do you want to limit it and say, you know, you can have up to 3 accounts or whatever? You can have them allocated within the system to an unlimited number of accounts. So that really is, you know, what your company policy is related to that. So when I go to generate, I have the last pay run that I did is marked. I just hit create file, and this is telling me it's been created. I can take a look at the transmission. This actually didn't have any direct deposit in, so I've turned it off. And this is telling me where the file was written to. So this will be either on your workstation or on your network. And then what you would do is each bank is going to be a little different as to how they want you to upload the files. Generally, they will give you a login to their site, and then you will just go in and point to that file and upload it. Okay, as far as the inquiry screens, we have a lot of different inquiry screens in the payroll module. I just wanted to show you a couple of them that are used quite frequently. The employee summary screen will be used to look at the gross wages, taxable wages, as well as tax amounts that were withheld for a particular month, the quarter, and the year to date. And again, you can go back to any year in which the employee had amounts for this for the payroll. The employee record summary is going to be similar to the inquiry screens that we looked at before, where you're going to see a breakdown of the wages and the hours, if it's a pay code. You can also look at your state and local taxes here. So this individual is an Illinois employee, I can look at the taxable wages as well as the withholding for each month, each quarter, and then for the amount for the year. My check history screen will show me each check that the individual had, and it gives me information as far as the gross wages, the net wages, and the federal taxes that were taken out. And I do have the capability here to recreate a pay stub. So if I get a call from an employee that says, you know, I misplaced my pay stub, could you give me a copy of it? You can come in here and duplicate the pay stub for any paycheck that the employee received. And then if I click on my transactions button, I'm going to see the rest of the individual transactions related to that. So my pay codes, this was a salary employee, had a 401 deduction, a medical insurance deduction, so on and so forth. Okay, so those are the areas that I wanted to cover today. And do we have any questions?
Yeah, we'll turn the floor over right now and see if anybody has any questions. That was great, Janice. Thanks for a great presentation. If anybody does have any questions, you can type a question into the question box, or you can use the hand raise function, and we can unmute your line and let you ask your question verbally. Leave this open for another moment here. All right, well, if there are no follow-up questions, thanks everybody for attending today. Thanks, Janice, for your presentation, and we will be sending a copy of this recording out to everybody. And so with that, I will go ahead and end the meeting. Thanks for attending, everybody.
Thank you.